First cup of coffee. Subcommittee will come to order. I welcome the witnesses and subcommittee members to today's hearing. As I've often said in the subcommittee, this is not a bipartisan committee. This is a nonpartisan committee, and it will remain as such. We owe that to the people that served our nation. We've got 9 important legislative proposals to consider here today. It's important to note that not all of the proposals will move forward in this process. The purpose of this hearing is to hear from individuals with expertise on the various legislative proposals so that we can make informed decisions about whether to move these bills forward. The valuable insight provided by these stakeholders and agencies is essential to the work of the subcommittee. And a number of these proposals seek to improve education programs for America's veterans and ensure that GI Bill dollars are being used responsibly. One of the bills being proposed by the chairman of the committee would expand the existing authorities of the VA Secretary to disapprove schools that are guilty of fraud or misrepresentation, and I strongly support this bill. This expanded authority will allow the Secretary to restore benefits and recoup costs for veterans who are defrauded. We've considered other proposals to restore benefits in situations where there are allegations of fraud. However, this is the first proposal that's rooted in the VA authority and includes the necessary due process for schools. I specifically want to highlight 2 bills that I'm offering for consideration as well. One bill would allow individuals using Montgomery GI Bill gained through service in the selective reserve to utilize in-state tuition waiver for attending schools in neighboring states. And as of now, they're not part of the waiver in the statute, and I think it's logical. It's a logical expansion of existing authority that allows reciprocity between states. We've got to remember that our selective reserves and our National Guard folks, the enemy doesn't care. They see an American flag on your shoulder and they will target you as such. We just learned this with our 3 brave soldiers that were killed earlier in Jordan. My other bill up for discussion today makes improvements to the Transition Assistance Program for service members leaving the military. This legislation would require data collection on the experience of transitioning service members. We need to have a better understanding of how we are preparing our military members and their families for civilian life. Certain branches are doing TAP better, and certain groups within branches are doing TAP better. Naval Special Warfare has an outstanding 24-month program, and I want to make sure that we can leverage the lessons learned and promulgate the best practices across the board. At this hearing, we will also explore legislation that would encourage VA to create a callback system instead of putting callers on hold. And this type of technology is widely available, and I don't know why we're not doing this now. It's just silly. I have reservations about some proposals in the agenda today, I'll be frank. The witness's testimony and questions to the members of the subcommittee are very important that we hear those answers from the questions asked by my fellow members. We look forward to hearing from members who have introduced these proposals as well as our witnesses on how we can continue to improve these bills and create more economic opportunities for veterans. I will now yield to Ranking Member for 5 minutes for his opening remarks.
Thank my friend, the chairman, for holding this legislative hearing on 9 pieces of legislation. I'd like to start out by highlighting a few of the bills on the agenda that illustrate our continued efforts to deliver more results. That's what this is all about, is delivering results. First, I'd like to thank Ranking Member Takano for his work-study expansion bill, which would provide more opportunities for veterans to participate in work-study in Congress. Next, Representative Davis's bill, the Veterans Employment Readiness Yield Act of 2024, will remove antiqued terms from the VR&E program statutes. My hope is that the change in language will encourage more veterans with service-connected disabilities to participate in the VR&E program. We also have legislation related to the VA Home Loan Program, which is a critical resource for service members and veterans wanting to own a home. The path to home ownership should be more accessible with the goal of ensuring more individuals can buy quality, affordable homes. Representative Ryan's bill would do just that by allowing National Guard and Reserve members to access the program, and Representative Ming's Fair Access to Co-ops for Veterans Act would expand the program to include residential cooperative housing. Shifting to education, I was surprised to see legislation regarding restoration of GI Bill benefits on the agenda, considering this committee marked up a more comprehensive restoration bill from Representative Ramirez last July, and that bill is still awaiting floor consideration. I want to be clear, I support the text of this restoration bill, but I think too many students may be left out. So I hope the Ramirez text can be incorporated and that we can bring it to the floor as soon as possible. Finally, I was excited to see a package focused on service member transition on the agenda, but disappointed that Democratic proposals were left out. If the committee is proposing changes within the Title X space, I would hope that my transition improvement by estimating Risk Act or TIER Act, H.R. 6725, would be included. I also have some newer TAP reform proposals based on the oversight visits that my staff and majority staff conducted last summer at Camp Lejeune, Naval Station Norfolk, and Fort Liberty. And I would hope that this subcommittee takes a wide view of what it considers transition-related, to include my Guard and Reserve GI Bill Parity Act, H.R. 7543, Mr. Takano's Justice for Service Members Act, H.R. 5516, and eVest Act, H.R. 5416, as well as proposals on food insecurity, federal military leave days, and updates to SICRA, USERA, VEVRA, and the SkillBridge program. On this bill specifically, I agree with the spirit and the intent, but I have some concerns around the content. I believe this subcommittee has a treasure trove of bills, Mr. Chairman, a treasure trove of bills ready for consideration, ready to pass the House, be signed into law. I'd welcome more legislative hearings this year. I stand ready to work with the chairman on his priorities. In addition, I look forward to the field hearing in the chairman's district next month and scheduling an upcoming oversight hearing I've requested on homelessness programs. We have much to accomplish, and time is running short. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, Ranking Member Levin. And listen, you're not going to get an argument out of me. You're right. This committee's done incredible work, and it's time that we get these things to the floor, get them voted on, give everybody a chance to say yes or no. Let people see where they stand, support our veterans. So I'll speak to leadership again today about getting this done, because you're absolutely right. Yeah, amen. We're here for them, not us. I will now introduce the witness panel. Our first witness is Ms. Melissa Cohen, the Executive Director of Outreach, Transition, and Economic Development at the Department of Veterans Affairs. Ms. Cohen is accompanied by Mr. Nathan Sanfilippo. Did I get that right? Yes. Executive Director of Multi-Channel Technology, and Mr. Thomas Alfonso, Assistant Director of Education Services. Our second witness is Mr. James Rodriguez, Assistant Secretary for Veterans Employment and Training Service at the Department of Labor. Now, unfortunately, while the Department of Defense was invited, and one of the main pieces of legislation is primarily in their jurisdiction, the Department of Defense declined to participate in this hearing. And you know what? Someone wrote here, this is embarrassing. It's not embarrassing, it's pathetic. So either the Department of the Defense cares about being able to transition someone from an active duty service member to a productive member of society and skipping the whole stuff about becoming homeless, a drug and alcohol addict, or committing suicide. They either care about that or they don't. So Secretary Austin, if you're watching this, you have 2,077,630 members in the United States military, and you can't cut one person here to try to help prevent veteran suicide? That's pathetic, Mr. Secretary. Get off your can, assign somebody to come here to these committee hearings, because we're sick and tired of you not showing up. Is that clear, Mr. Secretary? I'm a member of a co-equal branch of government and will be treated as such. Actions speak louder than words. I'm going to swear in the first panel. I ask the witnesses in our first panel to please stand and raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to provide is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you. Let the record reflect that the witnesses have answered in the affirmative. I ask the witnesses and members today to respect the 5-minute rule. I'm not going to ask you to respect it. You're going to. So thank you very much for that. Ms. Cohen, you're now recognized for 5 minutes to deliver your testimony on behalf of the Department of Veterans Affairs.
Good morning, Chairman Van Orden, Ranking Member Levin, and members of the subcommittee. Thank you for inviting us here today to present our views on several bills that would affect Department of Veterans Affairs programs and services. Joining me today specifically from the VA are my colleagues, Mr. Nathan Sanfilippo, Executive Director of Multi-Channel Technology at Veterans Experience Office, and Mr. Thomas Alfonso, Assistant Director of Education Service at the Veterans Benefits Administration. VA offers support for much of the proposed legislation before us today, and I will highlight several in my opening remarks. First, VA supports H.R. 7323, the disapproval of courses due to a public institution of higher learning not charging in-state tuition to in-state veterans, as this bill would allow Chapter 1606 beneficiaries to receive the same protections under the law as beneficiaries who receive benefits under other VA educational programs. Regarding the Fair Access to Co-ops for Veterans Act of 2024, VA supports, if amended and supported with offsets to the new benefit and administrative costs. We recognize that co-op share purchase loans present a unique ownership framework as compared to more traditional housing transactions, and we look forward to successfully implementing a viable program with the required level of expertise, authorities, funding, and protections in place to do so. Concerning the relating to flight training bill, VA would support if amended. While VA supports establishing a $100,000 fee cap, it is unclear whether the lifetime cap would apply to both degree and non-degree flight programs. VA welcomes the opportunity to work with the committee to provide technical assistance to ensure that this bill meets its intended goal. VA outlined a few concerns with the Title X TAP reform bill. While much of the equity of this bill lies with the Department of the Defense, VA seeks clarification on Section 2K, which would prohibit the furnishing of a DD-214 to a service member who did not complete the required pre-separation counseling. Ultimately, VA wants to ensure unimpeded access to earned benefits and services, such as to access to life insurance when transitioning to the civilian sector. Regarding H.R. 6656 Stuck on Hold Act, VA does not support this bill. VA shares the goal of exceptional customer service and closely monitors the quality of those calls. Average wait times for major contact centers are less than 15 minutes, with some significantly less. VA has callback systems functionality in place, and for the contact centers that use it, they are activated for wait time thresholds under 15 minutes. Lastly, VA supports the following two bills: restoration of entitlement of educational assistance and terminology regarding veteran employment. Mr. Chairman, this concludes my statement. Thank you again for the opportunity to discuss this important legislation to improve benefits and services for veterans, service members, and their families. We look forward to working with you and are prepared to answer your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Cohen. The written statement of Ms. Cohen will be entered into the hearing record, which, by the way, I read it. It's outstanding. Thank you. Assistant Secretary Rodriguez, you are now recognized for 5 minutes to deliver your testimony.
Chairman Van Orden, Ranking Member Levin, and distinguished members of the subcommittee, thank you for the invitation to testify here today. It has been an honor to lead Department of Labor, Veterans Employment and Training Service for the past 3 years. One of the bills being considered today would codify the Employment Navigator and Partnership Program, or EMPP, into law. DOL is currently carrying out EMPP under our Transition Assistance Program statutory authority. While we support specifically codifying EMPP into law, we strongly oppose the restrictive provisions in the bill. On April 1st, vets will mark 3 years since the integration of the EMPP into the TAP program. Initially spanning 13 DoD on-installation sites worldwide, we have expanded to 30 sites and established 59 partnerships with veteran employment serving organizations. Over the past year, we've leveraged HHS's National Directory of New Hire data to match transitioning service members' data and monitor their employment progress. Our preliminary data indicates promising results, affirming that EMPP's one-on-one innovative approach is effectively addressing veterans' employment challenges. Through our full-time Employment Navigator contractor staff and our employment partners, EMPP clients receive assistance with their resumes and career direction, as well as referrals to vetted partner organizations and American Job Centers that provide additional personalized support. The 59 non-government EMPP partners offer vital services, including job placement, hiring events, training, and most importantly, facilitating connections between transitioning service members and their new communities. Each partner brings a unique resource to the table, ensuring a holistic approach to meeting diverse needs of our transitioning service members. And this approach is aligned with VET's vision of getting the transition to civilian life right the first time. The National Directory of New Hire research shows preliminary findings that indicate a 10% increase in median quarterly wages earned for enlisted transitioning service members who participated in EMPP compared to their counterparts who did not participate. Based on findings and as funding allows, vets will continue to expand EMPP, and we hope that we can continue to do so using our current program model. In FY 2023, 5,747 transitioning service members and 383 military spouses received support or services through EMPP. According to participant surveys, EMPP has been a great success. As of February 2024, 97% of EMPP survey respondents reported positive feelings after meeting with their employment navigators and would recommend EMPP to a friend or colleague. Additionally, 97% felt EMP partners met or exceeded their employment-related expectations. As one EMPP survey respondent stated, the value of the employment navigator is having a one-on-one conversation to go back over the plethora of information you received in TAP classes and give you guidance and recommendations specific to your situation. Incorporating EMPP into legislation would secure its future, which is something VET strongly endorses. However, I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge that extending EMPP's reach globally to include all transitioning service members and their spouses necessitates further resources for vets. Financial implications of this bill would substantially increase the resources needed for a successful rollout. Additionally, we're concerned that the notion of funding EMPP partner organizations with taxpayer dollars and our partners under an MOU with vets committed to bearing no costs to either veterans or the government. EMPP grants organizations that are both funded privately and publicly access to service members in TAP, which assists them in meeting their metrics and their mission. The intention was never to offer financial compensation to a select few organizations, but rather to guide service members towards reputable resources outside of government aid that could accommodate the unique and various needs of transitioning service members. Therefore, we strongly oppose the restrictive measures in this bill that seem to favor only 5 to 10 large organizations for federal contracts. This would unfairly sideline the 49 non-government, mid-sized, and smaller organizations, as well as potential future partners. As the lead federal agency on veteran employment, DOL Vets looks forward to working with this subcommittee and our many partners and stakeholders to create opportunities that ensure all veterans, service members, and their spouses can have a good career and opportunities for advancement. Chairman Van Orden, Ranking Member Levin, distinguished members of the subcommittee, and this concludes my statement. Thank you for the opportunity to be part of this hearing, and I welcome your questions.
Thank you, Assistant Secretary Rodriguez. The written statement of Assistant Secretary Rodriguez will be entered into the hearing record. We're now going to proceed to questions, and we will all adhere to the 5-minute rule. I recognize myself for 5 minutes. Ms. Cohen, the Fairness to Co-op Act, can you maybe delve a little bit deeper into that, understanding that we are a constitutional republic, not a democracy, as everybody says on television, and each one of these states has individual rules concerning co-ops? Like even the definition changes by state. How would we make sure that we have fairness across the board and we don't sign up to something that we will have unintended consequences?
Thank you for the question. Part of the requirement of this bill is to work closely with Fannie Mae to make sure that we align with their requirements. We recognize that this is a very complex entity, and there'll just be a small pool of lenders that perhaps will participate in these co-op loans. So we are continuing to build the expertise to make sure that we can handle these complexities.
Well, ma'am, and please take this as intended, but I've been on this committee now for, 14 months or something like that, Mike, and I've noticed one thing that, from my observation, the VA has not been really great at being able to handle subtlety, and the more complex an issue, it seems like the more the VA screws it up, because it's complicated and you get so many fingers in the pie, eventually you got no dough left because it's stuck on everybody's fingers. So when we're talking about the difference between the definitions, we're talking about resale of co-ops, subletting of co-ops, defaulting on the loans. I'm very concerned, again, that we're going to wind up signing up for something and it's going to have very negative unintended consequences, because the definition of a co-op in the state of New York is different than the definition of a co-op in several different states. So as opposed to working with a home that we can clearly define as a single-family home, it's not an investment property. That's the VA loans or loan guarantees are predominantly designed to do. I'm not quite sure how we're going to figure this out. So I need much more detailed analysis of this particular issue before we sign on to anything from my perspective. Then the stuck on hold? Seriously? Come on. I called Delta Airlines. If it's going to be longer, then they call you back. I don't understand what the heartburn is with this. Like, are we putting people out of work? Is the veteran service experience going to be less enticing because they actually get to finish making breakfast as opposed to waiting for that horrible? Have you called the VA? Dear God, fix your wait or hold music, please. So is this, how is this going to be a negative, how is this going to negatively affect veterans if they're able to just have somebody call them back, I guess is the question.
Before I turn it over to my colleague, Mr. Nathan Sanfilippo, I will say in VBA, we have that technology that you're talking about.
I get it. I get all my health care through the VA system, all of it. So I get it. I'm just saying, is this going to be negative or positive? Who's going to answer the question?
Yeah, no, happy to answer that question. And you know, the bill, we 100% support reducing wait times and enabling features that allow callbacks and other things. In fact, we already have that capability in certain lines of business. As Ms. Cohen was noting, our Veterans Benefits Administration recently implemented that feature to provide callbacks for folks that have to wait longer than 5 minutes. So it's really just a matter of making that feature available to more of our contact centers.
You want me to change the bill so it says 5 instead of 15? I'll do that. Write that down. Good, thank you. You already have the technology, you've implemented it. There you go. Hey, well, the committee's adjourned. No. Hey, listen, man. No veteran, from my perspective, is going to get less care. Like, the line is not going to get longer for dialysis, right? Is that true? Someone's going to be able to get their rocking glasses in La Crosse, Wisconsin, like I did, in the same period of time. We're going to try to make sure they wait less on the phone, or even if they don't, because things happen, they can just get a phone call later.
Yeah, we're seeking to make advancements to reduce wait times in all of our contact centers, whether they're healthcare.
I get it, sir,
benefits.
but if you already implemented this in different areas, just implement it across your entire universe, and I think that'd be great. So we're going to change that. We'll talk to you from 15 to 5 minutes. Your input's been very helpful there, sir. With that, I yield back, and I yield to Ranking Member 11 for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Cohen, I'll start with you. Thank you for your feedback regarding the TAP bill. Really appreciate it. While I have you, want to discuss a couple related issues. I have a prop here. It's VA's TAP participant guide. I'm sure many are familiar with this. It mirrors the class curriculum. It includes content on the VA Home Loan Guarantee Program, especially adapted housing program, homelessness programs. As I look through this, one of the things that I don't see, and I hope I went through all of it, but I think we did, there's no information on renting a home. So reading and signing a lease, navigating expenses like application fees, move-in fees, security deposits, renter's insurance. And it seems that it's very critical information, particularly if you have a transitioning service member who joined the military straight out of high school, lived in the barracks for their entire service, have never gone through the process of renting a home, might be a higher risk for housing insecurity. My question for you is, has VA considered incorporating this content in its TAP curriculum, and why or why not? And if not, how else would you suggest we fill that gap?
Thank you for your question. I don't have that particular chapter in front of me. However, I will tell you that we review our curriculum annually. We can be nimble enough as needed to make changes and do inserts, ensuring that that information gets across to all of our VA classes. So I will verify, to your point, if there's a gap, we will fix it.
Thank you. I think that would be a great insert or a great addition to version 5.2 of this book. This is 5.1. TAP can't be the sole source of support for those in the process of transition. It's an incredibly challenging and pivotal time in a veteran's life. I was proud to champion Section 4304 of the Isaacson-Rowe Act, which directs VA to make grants to local organizations that provide coordinated transition assistance services, such as resume assistance, interview training, job recruitment training for veterans and their spouses. In July 2023, VA issued a proposed rule for implementation of the Veteran and Spouse Transitional Assistance Grant Program, and earlier this month, Congress enacted FY24 appropriations for VA, including $5 million for this program. Ms. Cohen, could you please provide the status of implementation, and specifically, what's the timeline for finalizing the rules, publishing a NOFA, and awarding the first round of grants?
I don't have that particular update here, as it wasn't part of the legislative bills. However, I understand, if I'm recalling, we're waiting for OMB approval, but we are staged and ready to execute as soon as the approval process is confirmed, but I do owe you a better answer, and I can get back to you on that.
Thank you. Well, we'll look forward to that. Another provision that I secured in Isaacson Row is 4303, which restarts DOL's Off-Base Transition Training Program, or OBTT. Ms. Cohen, VA told my staff in September 2022 that OTED and DOL had agreed to incorporate benefits and services information delivered by VA benefits advisors into the OBTT curriculum. However, the most recent update I received was that VA had not yet provided staff to do so, and instead, OTED had developed a single slide with VA contact information that's being presented by DOL at all OBTT workshops. Ms. Cohen, is that still the case? And if so, what is taking so long?
I need to confirm the one slide you're referencing, as I'm not aware of that as part of the OBTT. I understand the intent, and as we've looked for funding for future years, we have talked about off-base transition training to meet that population. So I will look into that due-out.
Okay, well, we have you on the record, and we're going to follow up on all of the above, and we appreciate your work in getting this off the ground. It's taken too long. I remember when we passed Isaacson Row, what our hope and expectation was, and all of these things have just frankly been taking too long. So we really appreciate speeding things up, and we've got your words on the record, and we're going to follow up with you. And with that, Mr. Chairman, happy to yield back.
Thank you, Ranking Member Levin. Mr. Sanfilippo, I want to be very clear with you. There's going to be one number that will be written into this, that this 5-minute thing is not going to count with. That's 8988, option 1. That's the Veterans Crisis Line. If they're waiting 5 seconds for someone to pick that up, it's wrong. So to be explicitly clear, we're going to change the language from 15 to 5 minutes to make it in line with what you guys want to do, with the exception of the Veterans Crisis Line 988, option 1. So thank you very much for pointing that out. Now, in accordance with Committee Rule 5 Echo, I ask unanimous consent that the gentlelady from New York, Ms. Meng, be permitted to participate in today's subcommittee hearing. Hearing no objection, we will proceed. Now, Ms. Meng is new to the committee, so we do 5 minutes, not 5 minutes and 1 second, which is good. And the chair now recognizes the gentlelady from New York, Ms. Meng, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair Van Orden, Ranking Member Levin, and distinguished members of the House Veterans Affairs Subcommittee on Economic Opportunity. Thank you for allowing me to testify today. I'd also like to thank the panelists from the Disabled American Veterans and the Veterans of Foreign Wars for testifying in support of my bill. I'm honored to speak in support of my Fair Access to Co-ops for Veterans Act, which would finally allow veterans to purchase cooperative housing units, also known as co-ops, through the VA Home Loan Program. The VA Home Loan Program has been a transformative benefit for service members for 80 years, but this program cannot be fully enjoyed by New Yorkers who served in our armed forces. In New York City, about 2 in 3 apartment buildings are co-ops, and if you've been to New York, you know that's a lot of co-ops. Co-ops on average are more affordable in New York than condos or homes. They offer a realistic option for working-class New Yorkers to own a home and build equity. Currently, a veteran or service member can use their VA home loan to purchase a condo, townhouse, mobile home, or manufactured home, but not a co-op. Last year, a recently married service member in the New York Army National Guard reached out to my office asking why he couldn't use a major benefit like the VA home loan on New York's most affordable housing option. His story is common amongst the roughly 200,000 veterans that call New York City home, and to the countless other veterans in towns and cities across the country where co-ops are present, like Palm Beach, Minneapolis, Philadelphia, and Baltimore. It's our job to serve those who served us, so let's serve them by increasing the accessibility of home ownership to more veterans. Let's expand the American dream that the VA Home Loan Program helped define 80 years ago. Let's give veterans and service members access to co-ops. Thank you again for your time and consideration of this matter. I ask the chairman, ranking member, and distinguished members of this subcommittee to please support my Fair Access to Co-ops for Veterans Act. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mangan. While you were testifying, Ranking Member Levin and I decided that the next time people are read onto the subcommittee that you'll be receiving a gift bag.
Ooh,
So thank you for coming.
I'll be here more often.
All right.
Thank you.
So we're encouraging. Thank you very much for coming today, and the witnesses are now excused, and I hope you're going to sit and listen to the second panel. On our second panel, we'll hear from the following witnesses. Ms. Nadine Bollock-Patinga, did I get that? Bam, batting 1,000 today. Chief Development Officer of Hire Heroes USA, Mr. Gregory John, founder and president of Infinity Flight Group, Mr. Matthew Schwartzman, Director of Legislation and Military Policy of Reserve Organization for America, and Ms. Christina Keenan, the Deputy Director of National Legislative Services for the Veterans of Foreign Wars. And I do have to tell you that my cover, getting my Paid Up for Life being sewn on right now at my post, 1530 in La Crosse, Wisconsin. So normally I'd be wearing that with you. Oh, sorry, and Mr. Is it Marquez or Marquise? Marquis Bearfield, Assistant National Legislative Director at Disabled Veterans of America. I'd now like to welcome the witnesses and ask you to please stand and raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to provide is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you. Let the record reflect all witnesses have answered in the affirmative. Ms. Bullock-Patinga, you are now recognized for 5 minutes to deliver your testimony.
Chairman Van Orden, Ranking Member Levin, and members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to speak today on this pending legislation. My name is Nadine Bullock-Patinga, and I am the Chief Development Officer with Hire Heroes USA, the nation's leading veteran and military spouse employment nonprofit. Many of the bills up for discussion today would greatly impact employment outcomes and economic opportunity for our nation's transitioning service members, veterans, and military spouses. I'd like to focus my remarks on proposed improvements to the transition process, as I believe the period of separation from military service to civilian life to be most critical for a veteran's career success. First, let me briefly describe Hire Heroes USA. Hire Heroes USA was founded in 2005 and has secured employment for more than 93,000 clients. We offer comprehensive one-on-one employment services in all 50 states to over 20,000 individuals annually at no cost. Hire Heroes USA strongly supports HR 7732, which includes comprehensive and sustainable reforms to the Transition Assistance Program, or TAP. This bill would improve the experiences of service members nearing separation or veterans who have recently separated. With approximately 200,000 service members transitioning out of the military annually, TAP must be designed and implemented in ways that maximize impact and effectiveness. We believe that various provisions of this legislation would address longstanding concerns about the structure and performance of TAP. Hire Heroes USA is especially supportive of the bill's proposal to codify and improve the Department of Labor's Employment Navigator and Partnership Program, ENPP. Initially a pilot program, ENPP began at 13 military installations in April of 2021 and has expanded to over 30 locations. The program is intended to complement the standard TAP coursework by offering more individualized employment services tailored to the unique needs of each transitioning service member and their spouse. Under the program, DOL staff work with employment partner organizations, including Hire Heroes USA, to assist clients with job placement, training, and various other career or wraparound services. ENPP was originally established under DOL's authority to provide employment and training opportunities as part of TAP. However, this program has never been codified into statute, a step that we believe is critical for ensuring the long-term success of TAP. Beyond codifying ENPP, the bill language also makes important improvements to the program's administration of contracts with employment partners. To date, DOL has not provided any compensation to ENPP partners and instead has relied on voluntary participation, placing the financial burden on VSOs. However, the success of ENPP strongly depends on the involvement of non-governmental partners. We deliver direct assistance to transitioning service members and military spouses while complying with all DOL regulations and requirements around data management and program evaluation. ENPP partners do this without any resources to support these expenses, an approach that challenges the long-term sustainability of this program. Hire Heroes USA alone has supported over 2,000 client referrals from this program since 2021. As the ENPP continues to grow, especially if codified, it is essential that the partners taking on a significant volume of referrals receive the appropriate support to sustain their participation. This would take the form of competitively awarded contracts for the highest impact and farthest reaching employment partners. To be clear, we also support the continuation of voluntary ENPP partnerships, in addition to those organizations selected for contracts. The language should further clarify this to ensure small and local service providers can continue to participate voluntarily. Together, these proposed changes to ENPP would promote the long-term success of the program and ultimately benefit tens of thousands of service members every year. Beyond ENPP, Hire Heroes USA also supports the bill's provisions that would establish a DoD pilot program for military spouses to receive one-on-one counseling services based on the TAP curriculum. While some spouse-specific transition resources exist, there is still a need for more comprehensive programming covering the full range of topics relevant to transitioning military families. On behalf of Hire Heroes USA, I'd like to thank again Chairman, Ranking Member, and the members of the subcommittee for your ongoing commitment to the cause of veteran and military spouse employment. I welcome any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bullock-Patinga. The written statement of Ms. Bullock-Patinga will be entered into the hearing record. Mr. John, you're now recognized for 5 minutes to deliver your testimony.
Thank you. Chairperson, honorable members of the committee. My name is Gregory John. I am the president of Infinity Flight, one of the largest flight training organizations in the country, based at the Trenton Mercer Airport, New Jersey. We collaborate with Mercer County College to provide veterans with an opportunity to become professional airline pilots, a lucrative, desperately in-demand career path. Today, I stand before you to express my unwavering support for the proposed language in H.R. 7613 that would implement a lifetime cap of $100,000 adjusted for inflation on veterans' entitlement use for flight training fees at public institutions of higher learning. The proposed cap is not only a financial safeguard, but a strategic move toward creating a more equitable, efficient, and responsible system for utilizing the educational benefits earned by veterans. By setting a clear limit, we are helping to ensure these benefits are used in a manner that maximizes veteran success in the civilian workforce while protecting the integrity of the GI Bill against exploitation. Further, implementing a lifetime cap encourages training programs to prioritize quality, safety, and effectiveness. In the Mercer County College program, we've seen firsthand how clear defined boundaries foster an environment where every single flight hour and every single training opportunity is utilized to its fullest potential. This focus on quality over the quantity of flight hours ensures that veterans receive the best possible education and training, preparing them for successful careers in aviation and at the airlines. Additionally, the cap addresses a critical issue that has plagued the system for far too long, the misuse of VA funds through what has been termed the blank check loophole, which has allowed bad actor institutions to inflate the cost of flight training, charging the VA far beyond the amount necessary for a quality education. By setting a reasonable flight fee cap, Congress will put an end to this exploitation, ensuring VA funds are used responsibly and more veterans have access to flight training opportunities without the risk of unnecessary financial waste. In my opinion, establishing the inflation-adjusted cap at $100,000 is appropriate based on the actual cost of obtaining a comprehensive flight education. Furthermore, applying the cap exclusively to programs offered by public institutions of higher learning encourages veterans to pursue their education at institutions already benefiting from an array of existing governance safeguards, ensuring financial protections for both the veterans and the GI Bill, as well as the delivery of a high-quality education. In conclusion, I urge Congress to adopt this language into law. It represents a balanced, thoughtful approach to supporting our veterans' educational aspirations while safeguarding the resources dedicated to their success. Let us honor their service by ensuring that their path to a new career in aviation is both secure and fruitful. Thank you for considering my testimony on this critical matter. I'm confident that together we can make a positive change that benefits our veterans, the aviation industry, and the nation overall. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. John. Hey, I appreciate your testimony, but I'm going to go ahead and gender myself. I will be addressed as Chairman Van Orden. Thank you. The written statement of Mr. John will be entered into the hearing record. Mr. Schwartzman, you are now recognized for 5 minutes to deliver your testimony.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Van Orden, Ranking Member Levin, and distinguished members of the Economic Opportunity Subcommittee. On behalf of the Reserve Organization of America, the only national military organization that solely and exclusively supports the Reserve and National Guard, thank you for the opportunity to testify on pending legislation and on ways to improve military to civilian transitions for our nation's citizen warriors and their families. For this hearing, ROA is prepared to provide technical assistance on most of the proposed bills. Our advocacy, however, is focused on those measures that uniquely relate to the needs of the reserve component community, are reinforced by an ROA resolution, or are aligned with our congressional charter. Ladies and gentlemen, the days of Reserve and National Guard service members being weekend warriors, they're long gone. They constitute close to 50% of the total force, more than 50% of the Army, and fight in our nation's wars. While these citizen warriors may not be widely referred to as Minutemen in the modern era, even today they must be ready for duty at a minute's notice. But despite being required to maintain the same readiness as their active component counterparts, the reserve components are often treated as a secondary class within their own military. ROA is thankful that today's hearing includes several bills that address these inequities head-on. H.R. 7323, for example, requires the VA to disapprove courses offered by a public institution of education that are not charged at the in-state tuition rate under the Montgomery GI Bill Selected Reserve. Despite being the first VA educational program to directly assist members of the Selected Reserve, it will be one of the last to receive this important protection. ROA thanks you, Mr. Chairman, and Representative McGarvey for sponsoring H.R. 7323 and urges the members of this subcommittee to advocate its swift codification in public law. Another example is H.R. 6225, the Expanding Home Loans for Guard and Reservists Act. This bill expands the VA home loan program to reservists and National Guardsmen that spend 30 or more consecutive days on active duty for training. From ROA's perspective, this bill serves as a cost-concern compromise on similar legislation that passed the House in the previous Congress. ROA thanks Representatives Jen Kiggins and Pat Ryan for sponsoring this bill, which recognizes the intensive nature of service during active duty for training and provides a solvent pathway forward towards home ownership for reserve component members and their families. Another bill that ROA sees great promise in, but cannot yet lend its support to, is the draft measure aiming to improve the Transition Assistance Program. Unfortunately, in its current form, TAP fails to meet the unique transition needs of Reserve and National Guard service members and their families. This fact was recently validated by a RAND report published last year that even went as far as to recommend establishing a reserve component curriculum track within TAP, which ROA wholeheartedly endorses. To resolve the current TAP dilemma, which is caused by its one-size, two-components construct, ROA proposes a 5-step action plan, which we refer to as the Delivering Reservist Integration and Veterans Education Plan, also known as the DRIVE Plan. ROA's DRIVE Plan, if adopted by Congress, would drive forward much-needed reforms by increasing access to component-focused counseling and resources while simultaneously providing reserve-affiliated participants with additional flexibilities in navigating their respective TAP track. Support for these proposals, among others detailed in our statement, would vastly improve military to civilian transitions for reserve component members and their families, who, unlike their active component counterparts, must make this transition frequently during their time in service and may even wait many years to receive their earned retirement benefits. Thank you again, Mr. Chairman, for inviting ROA to testify today. I look forward to answering any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Schwartzman. Excuse me. Yes. The record will reflect that Mr. Schwartzman's testimony will be, written testimony will be entered into the record. Ms. Keenan, you are recognized for 5 minutes to give your testimony.
Chairman Van Orden, Ranking Member Levin, and members of the subcommittee, on behalf of the men and women of the Veterans of Foreign Wars of the United States and its auxiliary, thank you for the opportunity to provide our remarks on legislation pending before the subcommittee. The views on all the bills can be found in my written testimony. I will take the opportunity to briefly highlight a few. The VFW supports the Expanding Home Loans for Guard and Reservists Act to expand the eligibility of the VA home loan to members of the National Guard and Reserves who have performed active duty for training for 30 consecutive days or more. The VFW supports this expansion to ensure that these service members and their family have housing stability needed to perform efficiently their duties as they balance military service and their civilian lives. Continuing on the topic of housing, the VFW supports the Fair Access to Co-ops for Veterans Act to extend the VA home loan to veterans seeking to purchase residential cooperative housing units, or co-ops. Most of the co-op housing in the United States is located in New York, which also has statistically lower rates of veteran home ownership. We have worked with the New York City Department of Veterans Affairs, who brought this issue to our attention. Expanding VA home loans to include co-ops would help provide long-term housing stability for more veterans around the country. The VFW supports the Restore Act to ensure that beneficiaries of VA education benefits are protected if an educational institution is found to have violated certain prohibitions regarding advertising, sales, and enrollment practices. Schools found in violation would be required to repay funds to the Department of Veterans Affairs, and VA would restore entitlements to beneficiaries. Requiring schools to be responsible for repayment would ensure that taxpayer-supported federal funding is safeguarded and student veterans are protected. We hope the committee will consider combining the Restore Act with the similar bill, H.R. 1767, the Student Veteran Restoration Act, which passed out of full committee. Combining these would provide even more protections against fraud for student veterans. Lastly, the VFW supports the intent of the Enhancing Service Member Transition Act. The VFW strongly supports the provisions which would improve the transition to VA, including requiring accredited representatives be included in the Transition Assistance Program. This would enable service members to have a point of contact to begin their pre-separation claims. We also support the bill's inclusion of pre-enrollment in VA medical care during transition. This would provide veterans with their earned benefits the day they leave the military. A warm handoff to the VA can potentially mitigate risk factors for suicide during that critical first year after service. Also regarding the bill, we suggest modifications to certain provisions pertaining to Title X. For example, we find that screening for potential homelessness and food insecurity to be a great addition, though it should also occur closer to discharge because these factors may not be known yet 1 year in advance during TAP. Additionally, including spouses in TAP would be a great addition, but the bill also creates a separate TAP specifically for spouses, which seems like a duplication. We're also concerned about withholding DD-214s from service members who do not complete TAP, as this could be harmful to them as they seek housing, education, and employment. We want to find effective ways to hold commanders accountable. We would be happy to discuss our specific concerns further to avoid any unintended consequences. Chairman Van Orden, Ranking Member Levin, this concludes my testimony. Prepared to take any questions you or the subcommittee members may have.
Thank you, Ms. Keenan. I appreciate it greatly. A vote has been called in another committee that I serve on, so this subcommittee will stand in recess subject to the call of the chair. I expect this to be a very short recess and we'll return as quickly as possible. Mr. Bearfield, you should be good to go We'll be back in a few minutes. This committee stands in recess. This committee is now in session. Mr. Bearfield, you're now recognized for 5 minutes to deliver your testimony.
Thank you. Chairman Van Orden, Ranking Member Levin, and members of the subcommittee. Thank you for inviting DAV to testify at today's hearing of the Subcommittee on Economic Opportunity to consider the 9 pieces of legislation up for discussion this afternoon. My written statement has been submitted for the record, and I will now highlight a few of the bills that are important to DAV and our membership. In my early years of being a veterans advocate with DAV, one of the things that I remember the most about helping veterans, dependents, and survivors was the time that they would have to wait to speak with someone at VA about their claims. Clients would tell me that they would wait for over 20 minutes to sometimes an hour on the phone before they were able to speak with someone from VA about their claims. This was frustrating as a representative, and I wanted to know what could be done to resolve these long wait times for our clients. H.R. 6656, the Stuck on Hold Act, which DAV supports, would address these long wait time periods for all veterans, dependents, and survivors calling VA about the status of their claims. This bill would give a waiting client the time it would take before their call was answered and the option to receive a call back if the wait time was over 15 minutes. As of March 1st of this year, VBA has over 992,000 pending claims. VBA has estimated that one claim generates 8 separate contacts to the call centers. This means that VA can expect at least 8 million calls this year. With the increase in claims and phone calls, VA must be prepared now. The Stuck on Hold Act is a positive step in the right direction. DAV supports H.R. 7703, the Fair Access to Co-ops for Veterans Act. The ability for service-disabled veterans and their families to have more options to obtain affordable housing in some areas of the country is of extreme importance. The provisions in this bill would give VA the ability to advertise this type of loan through notification to eligible veterans, participating lenders, and interested realtors of such loans. In many places where affordable housing is scarce, these co-ops offer families the opportunity to find housing that meets their needs. Affordable housing options are one of the top priorities for service-disabled veterans, especially those transitioning from active duty. DAV also supports H.R. 6225, the Expanding Home Loans for Guard and Reservists Act. This legislation expands the existing eligibility to the VA Home Loan Program and corrects gaps identified in Public Law 116-315, which expanded the VA Home Loan Program eligibility to National Guard service members who perform full-time National Guard duty for at least 90 days, of which 30 were consecutive. The draft bill to make improvements to certain programs for a member nearing separation or for a veteran who recently separated from service is mostly supported by DAV. But we have concerns with the section that deals with no members shall be provided with their DD-214 until they have completed their pre-separation counseling. Besides the noted exceptions listed in the draft bill, it is not clear how the program would handle a situation that is beyond the service member's control that would prevent them from finishing their required counseling. As such, it appears this legislation would punish the service member by not allowing them to receive their DD-214 in a timely manner. Finally, Mr. Chairman, H.R. 7653 would change the language in the statute from employment handicap to employment barrier. Words matter, and the word handicap has been perceived to have a negative connotation. Word choices can either make people feel included or excluded depending on the situation. Word choices can either uplift or demean differences or sustain or disperse stereotypes about persons with disabilities. According to the National Education Association, we should be conscious of antiquated words that have negative connotations for people with disabilities. Advocates of person-first language believe that a person with disabilities is an individual first and shouldn't be identified by their disability. DAV supports this change in the terminology in the statute and believe it encompasses VA's VR&E programs and removes obstacles for employment. Words matter. This concludes my testimony, and I'm happy to answer any questions you or members of the subcommittee may have.
Thank you, Mr. Bearfield. I appreciate it. Mr. Bearfield's written statement will be entered into the record. And by the way, I have a good family friend. They're named Marquess. That's how they pronounce her name, so please forgive me. Marquis. I appreciate that greatly. We're now going to proceed to questioning. We're supposed to have one more witness, Mr. Santo. Is it Mr. Santo or Mr. Santos?
I'm witnessing in his place.
Yes, I understand.
Yes.
He has a family emergency, and I hope that
Yes.
everything's going okay. And please, will you just follow up with the subcommittee staff so we know he's all right and his family's okay?
Yes, absolutely, will do.
That's not a personal thing. I think we need to take a little time to take care of each other.
Yes, will do.
So I appreciate that greatly. The chair now recognizes myself for 5 minutes. Okay, Ms. Keenan and Mr. Bearfield, you both brought up issues with the DD 214. I'm going to start with you, Ms. Keenan. What do you think the gripe is with the DOD, why they don't want to issue these DD 214s in a timely manner?
So I mean, I can't speak for them, so I'm not sure why, but I guess our main concern is holding chain of command and commanders accountable. I think that's what we want to try to achieve. And so, you know, we're just saying we're a little concerned that service members could get caught up in trying to enforce the transition. But I think we want every service member to go through TAP, go through the transition properly. So any way that we can work together to try to achieve that, we're definitely willing to do.
Very well. Mr. Bearfield, were you in the service?
Yes, United States Army.
Okay, so in the Navy, we got a term, it's called scuttlebutt. It's water cooler. That's what I was asking, Ms. Keenan. Have you heard any scuttlebutt about why the DOD would not want to do this? Have you heard any, Mr. Bearfield?
No, not at this time. I haven't heard anything about
Okay, well, I'll tell you what, we're going to try to make them do this because that's just silly. Our veterans are waiting, and it's true, our active and reserve folks, you know, they're on, they're off, they're on, they're off, and to have them sitting around waiting for a piece of paperwork so they can get a home loan or whatever it is, it's just dumb, and I'm sure that the ranking member and I agree on that. We do have an issue with TAP, and that is under this committee's purview, and as you articulated, Ms. Keenan, I think it's very clever that first 12 to 24 months is when our veterans wind up committing suicide, and because they don't understand what's going on, and we're not equipping them well enough. And so I want to have language written in for accountability, and it's not the first line supervisor. That's what they call them in the Air Force. I think it's so funny. They have career fields and dormitories as opposed to jobs and barracks, just throwing that out there, Air Force folks. But so this needs to be part of an OER, which is an officer's evaluation, or a fit rep, that's in the Navy. I want to hold commanding officers accountable for their troops going to TAP. And we're going to try to figure out how to do that. That is under the purview of HASC. But until someone is held accountable and until an officer, not an NCO, until an officer does not get promoted because their people didn't go to TAPS, nothing's going to change. And that's from personal experience. I was in for 26 years. And you can throw a bunch of enlisted people in a wood chipper, and they're just going to give you another enlisted person to throw in the wood chipper until our officers start getting held accountable. It is not going to change. Mr. John, what's the average cost to get somebody qualified to fly an airplane?
Today, from 0 hours, no experience, through commercial and flight instructor license is about $85,000 to $90,000.
Okay, so for essentially $90,000, we can get someone like me. I mean, dear God, I hope they're younger than me. You don't want me flying a plane, just throwing that out there. You can get somebody that gets out of the service, and for about $90,000, you can get them instrument rated, multi-engine rated, and they can start a regional airline working in what period of time?
About 12 to 24 months. So within 24 months of the day you start training, you could be at an airline.
And that's just tuition, that's not tuition and housing and all that?
That's correct.
Okay.
That's just tuition.
All right, let's do the math on this to make sure that we get this right, because you're right. I don't want people taking advantage of this. We do have a finite amount of money to deal with, and I want to make sure it's focused, so I appreciate that, and I would hope that everyone would support that, making sure that we have this geared, and as long as it's tied to an inflation and all the rest of the stuff that's written in the bill. And by the way, I read everybody's testimony thoroughly, and it's very good. Those are all the questions I have, but in accordance with Committee Rule 5 Echo, I ask unanimous consent that my good friend, the representative from North Carolina, Mr. Davis, be permitted to participate in today's subcommittee. Hearing no objection, we will proceed. I now yield back and recognize Ranking Member Levin for 5 minutes for his questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Schwartzman, good to see you. You stated in your testimony that you believe there are issues with the current construction of TAP, especially for reserve component service members, and I completely agree with that. For example, while I understand the frustrations that led to the proposal before us to allow Guard and Reserve service members to waive out of TAP if they have taken TAP courses recently, I don't think it addresses the underlying problem, which is that the current TAP curriculum isn't tailored to reservists. What can Congress do to address this?
Thank you very much, Ranking Member Levin. And let me also just say thank you for your longstanding leadership on the Guard and Reserve GI Bill Parity Act, ensuring that every day in uniform counts towards eligibility. So as I stated in my oral remarks and as I detail further in my written statement, there are 5 steps that Congress can take to improve the transition assistance program as currently constructed. The first is amend the eligibility criteria to participate in TAP. Right now, the requirement is that service members spend 180 consecutive days on active duty to qualify for participation. Unfortunately, for members of the Reserve and Guard, they may be left behind with that requirement, and so ROA recommends amending that to provide service members with the ability to participate if they spend 180 days cumulative of active service, which would also include drill weekends and ADT as well. The second would be to provide those reserve component members who may be taking TAP multiple times with diminishing returns the opportunity to waive their mandatory TAP requirements, although ROA does believe it's important to first ensure that the member and their spouse are properly educated on any of the changes in TAP's elements that may have occurred in the preceding period before following through on such a waiver request. And we also feel that consideration ought to be granted for not providing that waiver in the instance of an anticipated or unanticipated retirement or separation from service. The third step that can be taken is to add reserve component specific matters to the TAP pre-separation checklist. We've detailed these further in our written statement. One example would include information, advice, and counsel for how those reserve component members can receive separation of service documentation and then properly utilize that documentation in order to ensure they have the best position possible to obtain those service earned benefits.
If you could briefly summarize 4 and 5.
So establish a reserve component curriculum within TAP, so a separate program entirely, but also ensuring that those members meet those needs. And then the 5th is going to be to integrate military spouses into the service spouses TAP process entirely. Those are the 5-step plans.
Appreciate that. During our subcommittee's hearing on transition in May, we discussed the disconnect between DoD's mission statement and its authority over TAP. Sadly, this disconnect has meant TAP is not prioritized by those with the power to improve it. And while our committee stands ready and is eager to tackle these issues, as our primary responsibility is to care for those who have served, TAP is largely outside of our jurisdiction, and you heard the chairman's frustration. And, I've shared that frustration over the years with the lack of interest or focus at DoD on TAP. So my question for you, Mr. Schwartzman, would you be in support of moving the jurisdiction of transition to HVAC?
Unfortunately, Ranking Member Levin, ROA does not have a resolution specific to that. But if I were to ask my members if they would be supportive of that, what I would offer is this. So long as that was in accordance with the Constitution, so long as it's in accordance with the standing rules and parliamentary procedure of the House, and so long as that would lead to a more expedient passage of the proposals we're asking for, then yes, we would be in support of moving that jurisdiction. But we'll work with anyone.
So do you, in your professional assessment, believe that, in fact, moving the jurisdiction would be in accordance with those criteria you just laid out?
Unfortunately, I can't answer that question with finality. I'd have to go back and check the rules a little bit more thoroughly.
Well, what's your gut tell you?
My gut tells me yes.
Excellent answer. Thank you. Appreciate that. With the time I have left, Ms. Keenan, I'll turn to you, not to embarrass you, but I was told by staff your parents are in the audience, and I just want to hope that you are as proud of Ms. Keenan as we are grateful to work with her. The Isaacson-Rowe Act extended VA work study to specific activities in the offices of members of Congress, but there are some limitations there. And one limitation is that, as written, these activities would not be permitted in member offices. Would you expand to member offices as well?
The gentleman's time has expired. If you'd like to do a second
Yes,
round.
yes or no, yes or no? Then I'm done.
We'd be open to that, yes.
Be open to that. Excellent. Yield back.
Thank you, Ranking Member Levin. The chair now recognizes my great friend from Kentucky, Mr. Morgan McGarvey, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank all of you guys for your testimony. I'm really glad we get to dive a little deeper into these issues today, and I'm happy to see that most of them are strong bipartisan bills that we can just polish a little bit here in this committee. I'm also grateful that two of the bills I'm co-leading with Chairman Van Orden and Rep. Keene are included in today's hearing. Wanted to focus on the discussion draft of the TAP reform bill because I really want to make sure we get this one right. I think I speak for a lot of my colleagues, and they've spoken for themselves today. This is one where we do have some concern. There's some major areas for improvement within the Transition Assistance Program, and we need to make sure that TAP is accomplishing its mission, that it's not just death by PowerPoint. So I appreciate the focus on TAP with this bill, but I want to guarantee that any version that makes it to markup seriously takes into consideration the views of the VSOs and is truly a comprehensive reform that works in tandem with House Armed Services Committee and to ensure smooth passage. Deciding if and how to pursue education is a huge part of any veteran's transition. We know that the post-9/11 cohort is quickly becoming the largest and most educated veteran demographic in the U.S., yet the TAP reform bill in its current form doesn't touch much on this subject. So, Mr. Barefield, what educational elements would you suggest adding to the TAP reform bill? Have your members expressed particular concerns or items they'd like to see in TAP regarding their GI Bill education benefits and what their options are?
Thank you for the question. When it comes down to education and the TAP program, our members would like to have someone be able to fully explain to them in a timely fashion what their education benefits would be and how they could utilize them to the best of their ability. Like you said, death by PowerPoint, the TAP program as it is right now doesn't have enough time frame to adequately give that information. So we would like to see that education piece expanded just a little bit more, where they'll be able to have a full discussion of all their education benefits and how they could utilize them to the best of their ability.
Thank you. And Mr. Schwartzman, with the unique position of your members, what are you hearing from those who went through TAP or who will go through TAP regarding their education, and what are the biggest gaps in information for their education options?
Thank you very much. What I'm hearing from my members is that the biggest challenge is in the presentation not accounting for those distinctions, those differences that may negatively impact our members in relation to accessing their service-earned benefits. For example, there is a complicated line of duty determination process that the member must go through in order to qualify for certain service-earned benefits through the VA. That's just one example. And so what we're hearing from those that do qualify, we're also hearing from members that unfortunately don't qualify, is that the curriculum just isn't tailored to their needs.
Thank you very much. I appreciate those. And Mr. Chairman, I'll yield back.
Thank you, Mr. McGarvey. The chair now recognizes the gentle lady from Illinois, Ms. Ramirez, for 5 minutes.
Thank you so much, Chairman. So when I came to this committee, well, first let me start by thanking every one of you that is here today and everyone also that has been listening to the hearing today. It's really, really great to be able to hear from you and the ways that you continue to do the work to support our veterans and certainly our service members as well. When I came to this committee, it was my goal that every veteran had access to benefits they rightfully earned. That was a priority for me and continues to be. At the same time, it was important that I was also advocating for policies that protect veterans from being defrauded or exploited by bad actors. And it's why I was so proud that my bill, H.R. 1767, the Student Veteran Benefits Restoration Act, passed through this committee with bipartisan support, something we don't do much in this Congress. This bill would restore the GI Bill benefits of student veterans who were wrongfully defrauded by for-profit colleges and universities. And I know, as you do, that education is one of the many pathways towards self-improvement, towards self-sufficiency, and it provides communities the opportunity to better their lives economically, socially, and professionally. Access to a quality education is one of the promises we made to our veterans, and we have to deliver. Today, we've been discussing another restoration bill. And while I'm in support of any policy that protects our veterans and helps improve their lives, we also have to make sure we're not shortchanging progress for our veterans by advocating for smaller reforms. That said, I have just a couple of questions I want to ask in the time that I have. Some of these are yes or no. So for each of the witnesses here, could you answer the following questions with a yes or a no? We're considering another restoration bill today. Would this bill help students when the Department of Justice brings action against a fraudulent school? Mr. Markey?
Can you repeat the question, ma'am?
My question is, the bill that we are actually taking up now, the other version of my bill, would that bill help students when the Department of Justice brings action against a fraudulent school?
Yes.
Yes, it would.
Yes, it would.
I don't have knowledge of that, so I don't know that I can answer.
The same. I would have to look more into that before answering. Thank you.
Actually, the version that we have will not be able to bring justice against fraudulent schools in the way that the bill that that we passed out of here was doing. So thank you for your answers. I know you've seen a lot of bills. So let me answer another one for you here. The bill that we have now will not be able to give state approving agency acts to fraudulent schools. And so the question I have is it reasonable to say that while the bill we're discussing today makes good change, this bill is less comprehensive than my bill, which this committee marked up and passed unanimously back in July? I'd like to ask this question to Ms. Keenan.
Thank you for the question. The VFW supports both bills. So whether passing them individually or combining them into a larger bill, what we really want to do is protect service members, protect veterans and their benefits. We don't want them penalized if a school is acting badly. So we think, using provisions within both would give, a wider range of protections against schools that commit fraud.
And lastly, any witness can answer this. Shouldn't we prioritize bipartisan, bicameral solutions to ensure veterans receive the restitution they deserve for education fraud? Mr. John, Ms. Keenan, any of you can answer.
Perhaps within the scope of this committee, given the chairman's opening remarks, I would offer we should endorse nonpartisan reconciliation of the differences.
So we should prioritize bipartisan, bicameral solutions to ensure that our veterans receive the restitution they deserve for education fraud. Thank you so much. I just want to put for the record that this is one of the committees where we actually pass bipartisan legislation, and I look forward to working with Chairman Van Orden to make sure that we provide the absolute most support and protection for our student veterans. With that, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Ramirez. The chair now recognizes my great friend from North Carolina, the Honorable Mr. Davis, for 5 minutes. Welcome aboard.
Thank you so much, Chairman Van Orden, to Ranking Member Levin. I really count it an honor to be here today and to appear at this hearing held by the House Veteran Affairs Subcommittee on Economic Opportunity. Before I go any further, I would like to just pause here as I see the representatives of VFW, our disabled armed veterans, as well as our heroes, USA, and all those in the audience. Thank you for those who've served our country, that's worn the uniform, and those who have sacrificed. And to all veterans, and especially our disabled veterans, I salute you, and thank you again. As we come before you today, I wish to speak in particular in support of bipartisan legislation that I introduced last week with my colleague and House Veterans Armed Services Committee member, Mr. Juan Ciscomani from Arizona. North Carolina's 1st District is the home of 46,000 veterans who we're fighting for every single day. And H.R. 7653 is the 7th Veterans Affairs-related bill that I've personally worked on and sponsored in the 118th Congress. And this piece of legislation will make a technical fix to the Veterans Readiness and Employment Program to replace the term, as we mentioned, employment handicap with employment barrier, and the term serious employment handicap with serious employment barrier. While leaving the definitions unchanged, the word handicap is outdated, and it does not adequately represent veterans. Our disabled vets have given life, limbs, to preserve our most cherished freedoms, and I believe we must do everything to return dignity and respect to them. In any contact with the VA, we must ensure they feel represented and heard. VA services must not only remain available, they must be accessible, and to all our heroes who once worn the uniform of our nation. For those who provided incredible service to our country, they deserve, in return, quality service that considers them. As it was said, and I add, words indeed matter. So thank you so much for being here today, and I come to join my colleagues to urge support for H.R. 7653. May God bless each and every one of you as you're advocating every single day for those who served our country. And may God continue to bless this subcommittee. And thank you, Mr. Chair, for allowing this opportunity. And I would like to in particular also thank Mr. Ciscomani for helping and lead the way on this.
Mr. Davis, you're always welcome here. You weren't here earlier, but the ranking member and I decided to give people who are right onto the committee gift bags in the future, so come back. That's all I'm saying. Very well. I want to thank everybody for attending this hearing. I appreciate the discussion today on these bills, and a lot of them need improvement, and that's good. That's why we do these things. This does provide a way for us to get feedback from people that are affected by these and whose vocation really is to protect our veterans, so I appreciate everybody for that. I thank the members of the staff, the subcommittees. I think you guys are working very well together, and I know Mike and I have had discussions about this. We're very thankful for that you guys are putting aside partisan crap and just focusing on the veterans. That's very impressive, and I really like to see that. I just want to have a couple closing remarks. Mr. Schwartzman, do not let perfect be the enemy of great. And so when I read your 14 pages of testimony here, you know what? I'm just going to give you some encouragement. Make it 8 pages of stuff that is much more hyper-focused. And when we get down so far in the granular level, you're weighing down the ability of these subcommittee staff to actually get to what's going to be, what's really pertinent. And the stuff you're saying is pertinent, but I think that if we really look at that sort of stuff, we're going to see that we could have put a bunch of that aside and really get something great going, because nothing's ever going to be perfect. And I've only been in Congress for a little bit and figured that out within 4 seconds. But during the TAP process, I want to make sure that we are holding individual people accountable. So the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, the DOD, the VA, those are not individuals, those are organizations. So until, again, we hold commissioned officers directly responsible on their fit reps or OERs for their promotion or transfer, their servicemen and women are not going to TAP until they are held personally accountable with a big red check mark on that evaluation form. Nothing is going to change. On that note, the Department of Defense, show up. I'm going to speak directly to the Secretary of Defense again, Mr. Austin, show up. So we know what is important to you by giving the one thing back that you can never, or giving the one thing that you can never get back, and that's your time. And again, you have over 2 million servicemen and women that are underneath your purview, and you could send one person here to show these veterans that you actually care about them and the active duty servicemen and women that you actually care about them. I'm sick and tired of getting lip service from the Department of Defense about our veterans. It's been statistically proven that providing a good transition and off-ramp to the civilian community does not encourage people getting out of the military earlier. So knock it off and show up, Mr. Secretary. You know what? I'm going to give you an invitation right now. Secretary Austin, Mr. Levin, you okay with this? Good. The ranking member and I would like to extend a formal invitation to the Secretary of Defense to take one of those chairs and explain to us why apparently he doesn't care enough about the Transition Assistance Program to send at least one of his subordinates. With that, that ends my comments. I now yield to Ranking Member Levin for his closing statements.
Well, I appreciate everybody's hard work. I share the chairman's frustration that we haven't gotten the time and attention of DOD on TAP, and I've been at this now for 5 years. We keep at it, though, and we just have to continue to collectively request their participation. And we all have our different communication styles. But I certainly share the sentiment, and I just want to thank all of our VSOs again for their tireless dedication and for their collaboration. I also share the chairman's thoughts around staff working together in a productive manner. That's critically important. We have to keep that up. And as I said at the outset, the time is running short this Congress before it becomes a silly election season again, so we've got to get everything done we can as quickly as we can. That, Mr. Chairman, yield back.
Thank you, Ranking Member Levin. And again, thank you all for your participation today in this hearing. And I've received a number of statements for the record, which will be submitted again for the record as long as they meet submission requirements. I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous materials. Without objection, so ordered. This hearing is adjourned.
All right, sir. Thank you, bud. It's crazy, though. It's been nothing but endless grief with DOD, and we got them to come to like